Every year, the world's most powerful people gather in a secluded Alpine town. No votes, no cameras, no public record. And the decisions made behind these closed doors shape your economy, your health, and even the very air you breathe. Welcome to Davos, the World Economic Forum, or as people whisper behind closed doors, the world's most exclusive club of influence.
But what we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed and particularly also people in the gray economy.
For over 50 years, this fortress of power has quietly pulled strings, charting the course of nations while the public remains largely unaware. At the heart of it all is Klaus Schwab, a man whose name is spoken in hushed tones in boardrooms, government offices, and even the corridors of international power. Ravensburg, Germany. Schwab's early life was steeped in influence and controversy. His father, Eugen Schwab, ran Escher Wyss AG, a Swiss engineering company instrumental in Germany's war efforts during World War II, producing military equipment including flamethrowers. From a young age, Klaus was groomed for precision and ambition. Under his father's watchful eye, he pursued mechanical engineering, later earning a PhD at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. But Klaus Schwab wasn't just a prodigy in mechanics. He quickly realized that understanding machines was one thing. Comprehending the systems of politics, finance, and human behavior was another. His sight soon shifted from the factories of Zurich to the hallowed halls of Harvard, where he encountered one of the 20th century's most influential thinkers, Henry Kissinger. Kissinger's philosophy of realpolitik, a world of power plays and strategic maneuvering, left an indelible mark on Schwab. If nations operated like chess pieces, Schwab thought, then he needed a stage to influence the moves, and he would create that stage. By the early 1970s, Schwab's vision came to life. The European Management Forum, held in the serene, snow-clad town of Davos. What started as a meeting of a few hundred business leaders quickly became a magnet for the world's elite. But Davos was never meant to be a casual networking event. Schwab's ambition was far bigger. He wanted a platform where CEOs, politicians, academics, and financiers could meet, shape policy, and coordinate global strategy away from public scrutiny. The first meeting in 1971 was a quiet success. Over 400 participants arrived, intrigued by Schwab's bold idea. But chaos was never far away. The Nixon shock of 1971, when the United States abandoned the gold standard, sent global markets into disarray. Attendance at the next meeting plummeted, threatening to undo Schwab's nascent empire before it even began. But Klaus Schwab was nothing if not persistent. He began courting high-profile figures, religious leaders, politicians, and industry titans to lend credibility and attract participation.
All walks of life to address the challenges on the global agenda. That's, in an essence, what we are doing.
Yet Davos's rise to influence wasn't smooth. In Germany, the late 1970s were turbulent. Radical leftist groups like the Red Army faction targeted the industrial elite, assassinating figures such as Hans-Martin Schleyer. Schwab, whose forum included many high-profile industrialists, had to transform Davos into a fortress, investing heavily in security. From this point on, the forum became synonymous with exclusivity and protection, accessible only to those deemed powerful enough to enter. By the early 1980s, the European Management Forum was rechristened the World Economic Forum, signaling its ambition to influence not just Europe, but the world. Schwab's vision was clear. Davos wouldn't just host conversations, it would shape geopolitics. He orchestrated discussions behind the scenes during tense moments, such as the Greek-Turkish standoff over the Aegean Sea. Through back-channel diplomacy, he positioned the forum as a neutral ground, where disputes could be mediated quietly, away from public scrutiny. Davos became a theater of power, influence, and, for some, conspiracy.
The annual meeting, which is the annual meeting of our members and constituents, 2,000 people from politics and business.
Even as the world changed, fall of the Soviet Union, the rise of the internet, financial crises, Davos evolved. The 1990s brought the Davos Pact, where oligarchs and political leaders coordinated strategy during Russia's economic turbulence, ensuring favorable outcomes for select elites. The forum became a hub where economic policies, political campaigns, and even global crises could be quietly influenced, leveraging the prestige and connections of its members. By the mid-1990s, Bill Gates joined the club, bringing with him the might of the tech revolution. Through initiatives like Gavi, the forum began influencing public health at a global scale. Yet this influence was double-edged. Decisions affecting millions were being made by a few, in secret, fueling conspiracy theories about who really pulls the strings in our world. From its early days as a Swiss management conference to its modern incarnation as a global power nexus, Davos has always thrived in secrecy, and Klaus Schwab has remained the mastermind behind it all, quietly shaping the mechanisms of global capitalism, policy, and even public health, long before the rest of the world knew.
Parent organization. And if you look at the architectural style, it's a blend of Western and, let's say, Japanese Eastern architecture. And of course, everything is community-oriented, which means...
By the turn of the millennium, Davos had transformed from a Swiss mountain retreat into a global nerve center for power. Membership surged, fees skyrocketed, and Klaus Schwab's vision of a platform where elites shape the world was fully realized. But as influence grew, so did scrutiny and conspiracy theories, because the more secretive the power, the louder the whispers. Inside Davos, discussions once limited to European management and industrial strategy now spanned geopolitics, finance, climate, and even public health. Leaders of nations, CEOs of multinational corporations, and philanthropists like Bill Gates began shaping the world together, far from public oversight. These decisions affected billions, yet no vote was taken, no record kept, and that secrecy became a magnet for both fascination and suspicion.
To the forum.
Every person at this forum should ask themselves what they can do and whether...
The mid-1990s marked a turning point. Russia was in chaos. The post-Soviet oligarchs had emerged from privatization, amassing unimaginable wealth practically overnight. But the threat of political upheaval loomed. A resurgent communist party, led by Gennady Zyuganov, threatened to undo their fortunes. Behind closed doors at Davos, Klaus Schwab orchestrated discreet alliances. Oligarchs pooled resources, launched media campaigns, and leveraged the forum's influence to ensure Boris Yeltsin's survival. The Davos Pact, as it came to be called, became a blueprint. A small, powerful network intervening in political crises to shape outcomes favorable to its members. The 20s brought new challenges and opportunities. Globalization, the rise of the internet, and the expansion of multinational corporations meant the elite had more influence than ever, but also more critics. Anti-globalization protests erupted around WEF meetings, from Seattle to Melbourne, challenging the forum's growing power. Yet, these protests did little to stop the trajectory Schwab had set. In fact, crises only reinforced the forum's relevance. When the 2008 financial crisis threatened global stability, Davos became the meeting place for solutions, or at least solutions controlled by a select few. Schwab's Great Redesign initiative emerged from these discussions, advocating for coordinated global governance, stronger ties between institutions, and increased centralization of economic power. By the 2010s, the rise of populist movements posed a different kind of challenge. Donald Trump in the U.S., Brexit in the U.K., and nationalist movements across Europe directly challenged the ideals of global governance championed in Davos. Social media amplified dissent, making it impossible for elites to operate entirely out of public view. Yet, in true Davos fashion, challenges were transformed into opportunities. Schwab and his inner circle refined strategies to manage dissent, influencing public narratives and aligning major financial players with their vision. Then came the crisis that would define a generation: the COVID-19 pandemic. Borders closed, economies crashed, and social systems were tested like never before. Here, Davos saw opportunity on an unprecedented scale. In June 2020, Schwab unveiled the Great Reset, a plan to restructure global economic and social systems under the banner of equity and sustainability. Critics called it ambitious. Conspiracy theorists called it sinister. Either way, the message was clear. The forum's influence would extend beyond traditional economics into public health, environmental policy, and global governance. Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation became pivotal players in this global response, committing over $2 billion to vaccine development, diagnostics, and therapeutics. Decisions affecting the lives of billions were being coordinated by a small network of elites. In this world, access, influence, and alignment with the forum could mean the difference between disaster and opportunity. For Schwab, this was a confirmation of Davos's power. A crisis could not only elevate the forum's role, but also normalize the idea that a select few have the authority to guide global outcomes. Meanwhile, financial frameworks evolved. Larry Fink of BlackRock emerged as a central figure, championing ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing. ESG standards, enforced primarily through investor pressure, regulatory mandates, and market expectations, became a tool for the elite to influence corporate behavior. Prices, production, and policies could all be subtly adjusted through capital allocation. Critics called this overreach. Others called it centralized control. Inside Davos, it was just another lever of influence. Yet the deeper question remains: who really decides? With over 50% of key global assets represented by interconnected entities at Davos, decisions whether about energy production, climate policies, or corporate behavior could ripple across the world, creating consequences felt by billions who had no say. Market manipulation, intentional or otherwise, becomes possible, and antitrust concerns remain largely untested against this concentration of power. The pandemic, financial crises, and rising inequality only amplified these dynamics. Klaus Schwab and his inner circle had created more than a forum. They had engineered a global decision-making ecosystem, where crises could be leveraged, alliances quietly formed, and the world subtly redirected. Davos became the ultimate stage where power and secrecy intersected, where influence was as much about who you knew as what you could do. And yet, while Schwab and his allies expanded their reach, public skepticism grew. Populist leaders railed against global elites. Journalists and academics questioned Davos's role, and conspiracy theories spread across the internet. Some framed it as a benevolent engine for global cooperation. Others painted it as a shadow government, deciding the fate of billions with no accountability. Today, Davos continues to convene every January, each meeting more exclusive than the last. Its agenda spans climate, technology, finance, and public health. But beneath the official talking points, the real work is always behind the scenes. Deals are struck, alliances forged, strategies debated, decisions that may never see the light of public scrutiny. For those watching from the outside, the questions are stark. Who really shapes the policies affecting your economy, health, and society? How much power is concentrated in this Alpine fortress, and who benefits most? And most importantly, how much of your life is quietly being influenced by decisions made in rooms you will never enter? Every year, Davos reminds us that power is not just in wealth or office. It is in secrecy, influence, and access. And as Klaus Schwab and his elite circle continue to wield that power, the world watches, sometimes knowingly, often unknowingly, as their decisions shape the course of history. Because inside Davos, the future is never public. It's private, calculated, and quietly decided by the few.